the non-saying of what should have been said by Roberta, Colonna, Dahlman, and Acta Analytica. As always, feel free to ask questions along the way. It's my first time reading it too, so if I screw it up, sucks to be me. But let me know. So let's drop the music a little bit, and here we go. Implicature and conventional meaning. In his William James lectures delivered at Harvard University in 1967, Grice introduced the notion of implicature based on the empirical observation that speakers often mean more than what they say, that is, more than what their utterance literally means. This more is what an utterance can implicate, an implicature, a content the speaker intends to convey implicitly, that is, without explicitly saying it. In Logic and Conversation, Grice proposed a distinction between conventional and conversational implicatures. In the former case, it is the conventional meaning of the words used that determines what is implicated besides determining what is said. The example offered by Grice is the implicature depending on the word therefore, that is used to express a consequential relation between two statements. In uttering a statement such as Dwight is an Englishman, therefore he is brave, the speaker says that Dwight is an Englishman and he is brave, and at the same time it is reasonable to assume that she intends to implicate a consequential relation between Dwight being an Englishman and his being brave, that is, his bravery is a consequence of his being an Englishman. What's it called? The old joke where an Englishman and like a Frenchman are fighting, and the Englishman says, "You French, you fight for money, you're nothing. We fight for honor." And the Frenchman says to the Englishman, "Well, we each fight for that which we do not have." Of course, that would be the conversational implicature at that one. Not the conventional implicature. By contrast, conversational implicatures are essentially connected with certain general discourse features, in particular with the assumption that talk exchanges typically are cooperative efforts. According to Grice's well-known cooperative principle, language users are expected to make their conversational contribution such as is required at the stage at which it occurs by the accepted purpose or direction of the talk exchange in which they are engaged. The cooperative principle is further spelled out in 4 types of conversational maxims. Maxims of quantity, be informative. Maxims of quality, try to make your contribution one that is true. Maximum of relation, be relevant. And maximum of manner, be perspicuous. The interlocutor's knowledge of the conversational meaning of the words used, what is said, is an essential condition for conveying and understanding implicated meaning, what is meant. As said, on the one hand, conventional implicatures are entirely determined by the conventional meaning of the words used. On the other hand, conversational implicatures are not only determined by the conventional meaning of the words used, but rather by the fact that the speaker says what she says in a certain conversational context. However, even in this case, the fact that both speaker and hearer know the conversational meaning of the words used is a fundamental condition for a successful communicative exchange. This Grice underlines when he writes that for a conversational implicature to arise in a given context, it is necessary for a speaker to be able to use properly the conventional meaning of a sentence, that is, to be fully aware while producing a sense of what she is saying. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to give it again, like, this is written for philosophers, but they should give an example. They're just talking about what was said, but, like, if you use a good example, kind of this, one about, Dwight is an Englishman, therefore he is brave. So you're saying Dwight is English and is brave, and there's a relationship between being English and being brave, as English is a consequence. But they didn't give an example of an implicature that is conversational, not the conventional one, which is a little unfortunate right here for, someone who doesn't know this stuff. What I said, the joke between the French fighter and the English fighter. So the English fighter says, he was disgusted that the French were fighting for money. He was calling them a mercenary. And the French says, well, we each fight for what we don't have, because the idea was that although we fight for what we don't have, so the Frenchman says, well, we don't fight for money because we don't have money. But the implicature, because that would be the conventional implication is that, well, they each don't fight for what they have, but since the Englishman said he was fighting for honor, that means he did not have honor. So the Frenchman was insulting the Englishman, saying he was honorless, and so that would be the conversational implicature in that case. But like, yeah, so the each fight for that which we don't have implies that the Englishman also is fighting for what he does not have, and that's kind of, and in the context of what's saying is he's talking about honor, and so the Frenchman is insulting the Englishman, saying he's lacking honor. Okay, but anyway, so just to be clear, what we're talking about here, you have to be aware of what you're saying when you're doing this. You have to be a little bit more clever to add the interesting implications. Okay. If non-conventional implicature is built on what is said, if what is said is closely related to the conventional force of the words used, and if the presence of the implicature depends on the intentions of the speaker, or at least on his assumptions with regard to the possibility of the nature of the implication being worked out, then it would appear that the speaker must, in some sense or other of the word know what is the conventional force of the words he is using. Yeah, so in this case between the Frenchman and the Englishman, they both understand the words used, but the scope of the Frenchman saying is different than the scope of what the Englishman was saying. The Englishman was disgusted with the Frenchman for like being a mercenary, but the Frenchman is widening the scope. He's not like talking about himself anymore. He's saying that which we both don't have. And that sense is like, you have to realize that in the conversation, the Englishman was also implying that he had honor, and that scope widening isn't necessarily there conventionally to be including what the Englishman was talking about. Well, we fight for what we don't have. Because, like, well, if I just say we fight for what we don't have, there is no inherent scope to that sentence. It's just sort of a generic, general statement that we fight for what we don't have. It doesn't mean anything in particular. But in the case when the Englishman was talking about insulting the Frenchman for fighting for money and that he had honor, that he was fighting for honor, well, in that case, it did get covered under the scope of that which we don't have. That we fight for that which we don't have. Okay. I just want people to understand what's at stake here in the philosophy of language. How do you actually capture this notion of like the insult that was thrown at the Englishman? Because he's using the Frenchman was using the Englishman's own sort of argument against him. Okay. Symmetrically, it is necessary that a hearer be able to understand properly the conventional meaning of a sentence, that is, he must be able to comprehend what the speaker is saying. Indeed, Grice emphasizes that the presence of a conversational implicature must be capable of being worked out, and that to work out a particular conversational implicature is present, the hearer will rely, among other things, on the conventional meaning of the words used. Oh, and I should also note, insults and like stuff like that are, a hot topic in this area, and that's why I bring it up, this sort of thing. When you're talking, if you get like racist speech, like a lot of stuff, like you're implying something about a group of people, and that is usually not when like people are dog whistling there, or not. Dog whistle is a bad example, but when people are like insulting other people, a lot of times these sort of implications are built in, and it's kind of hard to tease them out, and that's why this is with hate speech and stuff, this is sort of like a little bit of a hot topic, or it was for the philosophy of language, because it looked like the philosophers really had something to say to explain exactly how you're insulting someone and who's being insulted in these situations. Okay, so I have no idea what's going on. They have literally said nothing new in this paper so far. We've gone 1.5 pages and literally nothing has been said of any interest. This is just exposition of stuff from 80s, whenever this book was, like, even maybe before. When was the Grice's Harvard lectures are in 1967, so they just are defining implicature and conventional meaning from 1967. They took a page and a half to do that. That's interesting. Okay, violative implicature contexts. As Grice 89 illustrates, conversational implicatures arise from either strictly observing or from failing to fulfill ostentatiously flouting a maxim or several maxims of conversation. Grice points out that at least 4 ways in which a participant in a talk exchange may fail to fulfill a conversational maxim. First, she may quietly and unostentatiously violate a maxim. In this case, as Grice puts it, she may be liable to act in a misleading way. Secondly, the interlocutor may opt out, saying or indicating that she is unwilling to cooperate in the way the maxim requires. Silence is a classic indicator of the interlocutor's unwillingness to abide by the cooperative principle. After having a long discussion, one of the interlocutors stops replying, indicating that she does not want to engage with the ongoing conversation any longer. Mr. Partiardi, what's up? How are you? Maybe by the end of the paper we will be able to read Implicatures as naturally as intended. One would hope so. But, like, I just find this funny that, like, you know, I'm not against people just, like, hopping right into the essay and, like, you know, going ahead. But, like, I have no idea where we're going at this point. Like, I didn't read the abstract. Maybe I should have read the abstract. They're assuming I read the abstract. But I have no idea what's going on, and maybe we'll find out. Maybe not. But, like, I'm just like, that's okay. Like, all this, nothing has been said here. This is all, like, you see, I don't know if you can see, but, like, we're still in this 1989 reference, 1989 reference. It's all the same stuff, like, the same stuff. So nothing even is, like, different about the reference here. So it's just an interesting way to start off. It's just talking about the same things. Like, that's okay, but, like, is this meant to just be a description of what happened in 1989? Or the book that, it's not a book report. Yeah. So I'm just waiting, but it's interesting. Like, it's not a problem. It's a short paper, so it's like they didn't waste time putting out, like, you know, just like telling us what's going to happen. It's just happening. But yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you just stop talking to someone, you just shut up. It's like, well, that's an answer too, and you're refusing to participate is like you're pleading the fifth, like our president did today. Yeah, today. It's great. Plead the fifth. Okay, thirdly, the participant in a talk exchange may be faced by a clash, being unable, for instance, to fulfill the maximum of quantity. Make your contributions as informative as is required without violating the second maxim of quality. Do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. Finally, the participant in a talk exchange may flout a maxim, that is, she may blatantly fail to fulfill it. This is the kind of violation that Grice calls maxim exploitation, and is the case that typically gives rise to a conversational implicature. By flouting a maxim, we must mean flouting it on the level of what is said. Since the communication of the intended content goes through, we cannot assume that a maxim violation takes place at the level of what is communicated. What happens is rather that the speaker flouts the way of satisfying the maxim that relates to the conventional meaning of what she says, that is, by using words that violate it. However, since the speaker is able to convey her intended implicature, the way of satisfying the maxim depends on the implicated meaning is still fulfilled. As Grice puts it, in these examples, though some maximum is violated at the level of what is said, the hearer is entitled to assume that the maxim, or at least the overall cooperative principle, is observed at the level of what is implicated. Yeah, so if you go back to the example where the Englishman is disgusted with the Frenchman and says, you disgust me, you fight for money, and the Frenchman says, well, and the Englishman says, you fight for money, we fight for honor, and the Frenchman says, well, you know, we each fight for that which we don't have. The point is that saying a general statement that we each fight for that which we don't have is sort of not being specific to what was said. It's not defending the Frenchman's being a mercenary. It's not a specific statement. It's a general, like, statement that isn't being very specific. And so that would be make your contribution as informative as is required. It is flouting the quantity. Make your contribution as informative as required, because you're saying some general statement that we each fight for that which we don't have is not a specific claim. So it's not as informative as it is, but the implicature is that the Englishman is fighting for honor because he lacks honor, but the Frenchman just lacks money, which is, you know, a less bad thing. It's no crime in being poor, but being without honor is, you know, worse. So that's what. I almost lost my drink, my water. Yeesh. But yeah, so that's what's going on here. If you are flouting it and stuff, The Polymath Man, what's up? Hey man, I'm just home from a festival in Ireland that involves a goat being announced king, placed 50 feet in the air. We all drink and celebrate around him. That sounds fucking amazing, and I kind of wish I was there. Like, I'm sitting in, like, too hot New York, and it's just disgusting, and that sounds great. Damn it. Yeah, I have to get out of here. Like, I've been, like, I have not done much of anything for a very long time at this point. And that sounds like I'd love to go to, like, some, Irish festival and do just whatever random crazy shit that the locals have come up with. It sounds like a fucking great time. Puck Fair, 400 years old. Even the name sounds great. Puck Fair. Yeah. So yeah, I'm jealous. But yeah, we're reading this stuff about philosophy of language, which is super less exciting. It sounds like a great fucking time. I should like plan to go next year or something. Is it this time of year every year? Is it like an August festival? And also, why is a goat being announced king? I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. I just don't understand why. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and also, since you're, like, the Irish are good at insults, they got the gift of gab, as it were. Maybe I'll appreciate the talk of insults. And I'm talking about insulting the English, for that matter. I apologize if you're English, but the English, they can handle it. They can handle themselves. Okay. Assuming that the speaker is able to fulfill the maxim she is blatantly violating, and to do so without breaking another maxim because of a clash, and that she is neither opting out nor trying to mislead given the blatancy of her violation, the hearer will reasonably wonder how the speaker's conversational behavior can be reconciled with the supposition that she is observing the cooperative principle. In defining the notion of conversational implicature, Grice writes that a man who, by in, when, saying or making up as if to say that P has implicated that Q may be said to have conversational implicated that Q, provided that 1. He is to be presumed to be observing the conversational maxims, or at least the cooperative principle. 2. The supposition that he is aware or thinks that Q is required to make his saying or making as if to say P, or doing in those terms consistent with the what the hell is this sense? The supposition that he is aware or thinks that Q is required in order to make his saying or making as if to say P, or doing so in those terms, consistent with this presumption. And 3, the speaker thinks and would expect the hearer to think that the speaker thinks that it is within the competence of the hearer to work out or grasp intuitively that the supposition mentioned in 2 is required. Hey, what are we exploring today? This philosophy of language. We're talking about, this is a paper on, so far, we're just talking about Grice. Absolutely, what's interesting here, Evolve Yourself, how you doing, Evolve Yourself, by the way? Absolutely nothing has been said in this paper. No. The paper has just been talking about Grice, and has said it's had one reference, and it's just talking about the reference, and it hasn't said a damn new thing yet. But it's interesting, we're talking about conversational implicature, and I've just been, explaining what it is, and so as we go through, like, the different things in here. If anyone doesn't know, Evolve Yourself TV is a streamer. Go give him a follow. He does a lot of meditation and, like, chakra balancing, so you get, like, a sort of a full body and mind workout over there. He knows his philosophy of science, metaphysics, epistemology stuff. Like, he's in that area. I always get this stuff wrong. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so he does mind, metaphysics, science, and he's also a chess teacher, so you can get some chess over there. And sorry, I just had to go. I can't remember things when streaming. So yeah, so drop him a follow. He's a good guy and a good streamer. Polymath Man says every year, yeah, he is the king of the town for 3 days. He is married to a local girl for the period. Not a fan of the English colonialism for obvious reasons. I love the philosophy of language, especially when you think of the deaf and mute people. Yeah, so that's cool. I mean, who's the lucky girl? Jeez, just to be married to the king. But anyway, yeah. That's what's going on. So yeah. So yeah, I'm still waiting. We're 2 or 3 pages in at this point. I haven't found a single claim that the authors has not made a single claim yet, and there was no introduction. They just started launched into it, which I'm okay with. But I'm waiting. So it's interesting. Anyhow, so I'll continue. And as always, feel free to ask questions along the way, but nothing's happened yet, so I don't know. Okay, the distinction between implicatures that arise in violative context by flouting some maxims and those that arise without any infraction is worth emphasizing. Okay, so in this case, so finally they said something that was not just Grice. So there are 2 kinds of implicatures here. According to Grice, conversational implicatures are carried out by saying of what is said and the way of saying it. I contend that whenever a speaker implicates a content by flouting one or several maxims, her implicature is not only carried by the saying of what is said and the way of saying it, but also by the non-saying of what would have been normal, that is, in compliance with the relevant norm to say in that particular context. The flouting of a maxim implies that the speaker is consciously using an utterance that is not the kind of utterance a hearer would expect to hear in the particular context in which the communicative exchange takes place. Okay, so now we finally have a claim. Let's finish it up and we can talk this paragraph up and we'll talk about. Thus, conversational implicatures that arise in violative context depend on the saying of what the speaker says in combination with the non-saying of what the speaker should have said to abide by a relevant norm, but chose not to say. Okay, so this makes sense. It's saying, look, when you crack a joke, you could have said something that was not funny, but instead you chose to do something that, cracked a joke, and therefore you did break a norm because you sort of broke out of the conversational flow by cracking a joke, but that also means you understood what could have been said and then you said something funny instead. So you had to know what still would have made sense to crack a joke that was relevant. Because if you don't crack a joke if you crack a joke that's not relevant, then you're just like completely off topic, and that's a different thing. But if you crack a relevant joke or you make a relevant insult, that means you could have continued the conversation as it was normally going. But if you crack an insult like the Frenchman did of the Englishman in my example, then you know what could have been said, and that is important to explaining why the joke is relevant at the time. So so this is, we're going to probably get this one. Okay, let's take Grice's garage example, a scenario in which the speaker conveys an implicature according to her communicative intention without involving any maxim violation. A is out of petrol and informs B by passing by, I am out of petrol. Yes, like how exactly, evolve yourself. Exactly. So A informs B, I am out of petrol. B replies, there is a garage around the corner, implicating, I believe that the garage around the corner is open and has petrol to sell. In this case, the implicature is conveyed without infringing any maxim. B is indirectly communicating what she believes to be true, and her reply is sufficiently informative, relevant, and clear. In Grice's words, B would be infringing the maxim be relevant unless he thinks or thinks it possible that the garage is open and has petrol to sell, so he implicates that the garage is, or at least may be open, etc. Since B believes that, or it is possible that, the garage is open and has petrol to sell, she is presumably not infringing the maxim be relevant, nor any other maximum. Another typical non-violative scenario is the one in which the speaker conveys so-called scalar implicatures. A discovers that all the cookies in the cupboard are gone and asks B, who ate the cookies? B replies, John ate some of the cookies, implicating John. John ate some, but not all of the cookies. The implicature is conveyed without maxim exploitation. B is indirectly communicating what she believes to be true, that John ate some, but not all of the cookies, and her reply is sufficiently informative, relevant, and clear. Now let's turn to a violative scenario. In Grice's famous example of the reference letter, the speaker conveys a conventional implicature by patently infringing the maxims of quantity and relation. In writing a testimonial about a pupil who is a candidate for a philosophy job, A says, Dear Sir or Madame, Mr. X's command of English is excellent and his attendance at tutorials has been regular, yours, etc. By saying this, A intends to communicate, that is, she is implicating that Mr. X is not good at philosophy. In this case, A's implicature depends on what she says. X's command of English is excellent, in combination with what she should have said following the maxim of relation and quantity, but chose not to say. Mr. X is good at philosophy, or Mr. X is not good at philosophy. In other words, A is infringing the maxims of relation and quantity that apply to the composition of a valid reference letter. Reference letter. In order to follow these maxims, A should have said whether X was good at philosophy or not. Since A chose not to say what was normally A chose not to say what was normal to say in a reference letter for a philosophy job, it is plausible to assume that A intends to communicate a negative judgment indirectly. Yeah, and that's the thing. In my example, like where the Englishman says, "You French, we English fight for honor, you guys fight for money," and the Englishman says, "Well, we each fight for that which we do not have." You are violating the relation of quantity because you're not specifying any like thing that was actually said. You're just saying we each fight for that which we don't have. It's just a sort of general statement, but in that it implies that what the Englishman does not have is honor because that's what he fights for. So you're not saying that specifically. You're making a general statement, but you have to imply that by putting it into that particular situation, which is a conversational context. So yeah, and in this case, the context is a reference letter, and that one it's in the argument over honor. Okay, so, but I mean, this is why it's interesting in insults. It's a more everyday example than this reference letter thing. Another violative embedded content. Yeesh. Another violative context is the one in which someone gives a completely irrelevant reply implicating that the topic of conversation is inappropriate. At an elegant reception, A says, "Mr. X is an arrogant liar, don't you think?" B replies, "The weather has been quite delightful this summer, hasn't it?" By blatantly flouting the maximum of relation, B is clearly implicating that she finds A's topic of conversation inappropriate. She does not want to discuss whether Mr. X is an arrogant liar or not. She wishes to change it. B's implicature depends on what she says. "The weather has been quite delightful this summer, hasn't it?" in combination with what she should have replied following the maximum of relation, but chose not to say. "You are right, Mr. X is an arrogant liar," or "You are wrong, Mr. X is a good person." Interestingly, implicatures that arise in violative context depend not only on the saying of what is said, but also on the non-saying of what should have been said. It requires a larger portion of knowledge than that necessitated by implicatures that do not involve any violation. Apart from requiring a general knowledge of the conversational context and its background, and a more specific knowledge of the conversational meaning of the words used, implicatures arise in violative context requiring knowledge of the normative system that is relevant to in the context at hand, and the awareness that the relevant normative system has been flouted. Non-saying. Hey Valpo, what's up? This is basically you're ignoring or violating, conversational maxim. You're basically, exactly. Thank you, Grace, baby. So they're just arguing that whenever you make a joke or you're doing something slightly outside of like the conversational cooperative principle, then you have to know both what you could have said and then what you are saying. So you have to know both things. Yeah, that's right, Evolve Yourself. You have to have an understanding, but you can't always assume the other person is gonna get all your implications. But you have to. For you to have maximum effect, they have to understand everything. But you can also be doing it for, other people's benefit. Like this just example right here is, you could be doing it for other people when you're saying, "Oh, that guy's a liar." You say, "Well, you change the subject." It could be to, signal to other people. So someone has to understand the background assumptions. Maybe not even the speaker. They may not have realized it was a bad thing to say what they said. But yeah. I mean, you're right. People have to understand, or else they have to understand something, or else there's no point in you doing that, flouting any rules. But then again, if you have to stick to the most basic understanding of your words, then you're not really in a conversation. You're talking to a child or something. It's if I can't crack a joke, I don't want to be in that conversation anyway. Okay. A speaker is successful in conveying the implicature she intends to convey by using an inappropriate utterance because she can rely on two facts. Valpo says, so if I say the job candidate has excellent handwriting, there is an unsaid message there. Oh, absolutely. If like you start talking about things that are irrelevant to philosophy in a reference letter, they're gonna know that, unless you're a complete moron, in which case they're not gonna believe you either, that like the person you're recommending is not a good recommendation. Otherwise, you'd say, like, you just state that they were a good person to take. You wouldn't be talking about their writing, which is irrelevant. But like they assume you would know that, so that's why. Yeah. Okay. First, you can trust that her hearer knows the rules that are relevant in the conversational context. Yeah, and this is what Evolve Yourself is saying right here. She can trust that the hearer knows the rules that are relevant in the conversational context at hand, that is, her hearer knows how an appropriate utterance would sound. Secondly, she relies on the fact that her hearer assumes she is being cooperative, even though she is using an inappropriate utterance. When communication occurs between actors belonging to different cultures, it is thus plausible to expect that some implicatures conveyed in the violative context are doomed to fail, because actors belonging to different cultures may refer to different normative systems. Yeah, this is why it's really hard to crack cross-cultural jokes, because the normative systems do not work, or maybe different in different cultures, and that's why, you know, you get like awkward jokes and awkward silences sometimes, and people don't realize that they've said something inappropriate. Okay, for instance, in the reference letter scenario, Grice probably imagined that the communicative exchange occurred between two academics of an English-speaking country. Let us imagine, however, a situation in which A sent her testimonial to a colleague in a non-English speaking country, unaware that in that country an excellent command of English is highly valued. In fact, it is a requirement for any philosophy job. For instance, because philosophy employees are expected to hold lectures in English, and lecturers who are able to teach in English are quite rare. And thus, a statement guaranteeing a candidate's remarkable proficiency in English happens to be valuable information in a recommendation letter. In this case, the implicature that A intends to convey, Mr. X is not good at philosophy, might not be grasped by her addressee. Yeah, so if there happened to be something where complimenting their language skill actually meant something very important, then yes, the implicature would be misconstrued. The Gricean distinction between conversational implicatures that arise without infringing the conversational maxims and those that arise by exploiting them results thus in a distinction between pragmatic implications having different epistemic requirements. It might be argued that the latter are epistemically heavier than the former. This argument calls for empirical testing, and I leave this task to further studies. In the following, I intend to discuss another hypothesis, that implicatures arising without violation, being built only on the saying of what is said, are more strongly tied to the assertion expressed by the utterance used than those arising through maxim exploitation. I mean, that seems reasonable. I mean, if you're gonna like crack a joke or make one of these like insults, because basically if you're saying someone's good at philosophy by saying that they're their handwriting's good or that they're good at English, I mean, that's insulting them. And so it's like, but if you're not doing something like that, then you're going to be sticking to the strongly tied to like whatever you're saying, and you don't actually have to go reason about something else. You just look at what was said as what was written, basically, if you were to write it down, just the words on the page, not what you have to reason from them. Okay. False assertion test. I have argued that the distinction between conversational implicatures that are only carried by the saying of what is said and those that are built on the saying of what is said in combination with the saying of the non-saying of what should have been said corresponds to the Gricean distinction between implicatures that arise without exploiting any maxim and those that, by contrast, arise by means of an exploitation. Conversational implicatures that arise without maximum exploitation are only built on the saying of what is said, while those that arise by maximum exploitation are carried by the saying of what is said in combination with the non-saying of what should have been said. Now it might be argued that the former, being built only on the saying of what is said, are more strongly tied to the assertion expressed by the utterance used than the latter. This hypothesis seems confirmed when we look at situations where the assertion generating the implicature is believed to be false by the hearer, or where the hearer believes that the generating assertion is believed to be false by the speaker. That is, the hearer believes that the speaker is lying. Let us first assume the following state of affairs. The speaker intends to convey an implicature Q, and she knows that by saying P, she may succeed in conveying Q, counting on the fact that her hearer believes that she is conforming to the cooperative principle, so she utters P. The hearer is able to recognize the speaker's communicative intention and her will to convey Q, however, he has reason to believe that P is false. Crucially, in this case, we find that the alleged falsity of the generating assertion P, that is, its falsity according to the hearer, affects the implicature Q differently depending on whether the implicature belongs to a violative or non-violative context. In particular, an alleged false assertion leads to the rejection by the hearer of the speaker's communicated implicature when the implicature does not involve exploitation and only relates to the saying of what is said. I'll try to explain this in a minute, but let's get through this very long paragraph. The implicature is successfully conveyed by the speaker and grasped by the hearer. However, the hearer, believing that the generating assertion is false, assumes that the implicature expresses useless information, and he refrains from accepting it in the common ground of information shared with his interlocutor. I'm not dropping any frames there. It might be on your side, Evolve Yourself, but thank you. I mean, if anyone else is still like paying attention, let me know. But my bitrate seems good on my side. So try to give a refresh. So, okay, good. Yeah, Twitch has been blinking in and out recently. I had some streams. I walked away. I went to the bathroom. I was watching some streams earlier tonight. I went to the bathroom. I came back. My player had crashed. So it's like I think Twitch is a little. They're trying hard. They're not. You see, if I just say they're trying hard, what I should have said is that either it's working or it's not, but the implicature is that it ain't working at that point by saying it's trying hard. And I violated the cooperative maxim of, saying what I should have said, which is the more specific statement was they're failing at providing streaming services. So, yeah. But, okay, the whole point here is that if you don't agree that Twitch is failing, what I just said, then you reject if you reject that they're trying hard, then you might also reject that they're failing. And so that's what the person here is saying. So if you just reject like my statement, then in this case where they're saying, look, if you reject it outside, there was some kind of update, I don't doubt it. You didn't download it yet. Oh, interesting. Yeah, something happened. Like both my I had two streams going. I walk away and they both had crashed. I was like, okay, something happened. Thank you, Twitch. Yeah. Okay, but whatever. As long as I'm not like dying here, it's all right. Yeah. So let me just get to the end of this. But yeah, if you decide that what I say is just wrong, then you can also disregard the implicature. Like if I say, yeah, Twitch is trying hard, and you don't think they are, then it doesn't matter whether or not I should have said that Twitch is succeeding or failing at providing streaming services. Okay. By contrast, the alleged falsity of the generating assertion does not lead to the rejection of the speaker's communicated implicature when the implicature involves exploitation and relates to the saying of what is said in combination when the non-saying of what should have been said. Wait, so we're not rejecting it? Does not lead to the rejection of the speaker's communicated implicature. Oh, okay, so yeah. So even when I'm saying something that like I'm making fun of them, you still understand what I'm saying. Even if you disagree that they're trying hard, because you know that I'm making fun of them when I say they're trying hard in the face of everything failing. So, but like if I implicature something that you just disagree with, then you can just outright reject everything that I'm saying, because you're just outright rejecting the logic of the conversational convention. So that's fine. Okay, so the author will take care of it here. Let's take our scenarios, the non-violative, garage scenario, cookie scenario, and the violative one, the reference letter scenario and the reception scenario. Crucially, we can see that the alleged falsity of the assertion by which the speaker intends to convey her implicature affects the implicature differently depending on whether the scenario is validative or not. In the garage scenario, if A believes that B's assertion is false, A has reason to believe that there is no garage around the corner. B's intended implicature, that is, the assertion that she believes the garage is around the corner and open and has petrol to sell, is rejected. Yeah, so if you just don't buy what someone's selling, you also don't buy the entailments from that statement, the implications, whatever is entailed. Likewise, in the cookie scenario, if A believes that B's assertion is false, A has reason to believe that John did not eat any cookies. The implicature, that is, the assertion that John ate some of the cookies but not all of the cookies, is rejected. Yeah. So again, you don't get the consequences, the things that can be implied from that. Contrastingly, in the reference letter scenario, even if the addressee of the letter believes that A's assertion is false, he has reason to believe that Mr. X's command of English is poor. The implicature, that is, the assertion that Mr. X is not good for a philosophy job, is not rejected. Similarly, in the reception scenario, even if A thinks that B is expressing a false assertion, according to A, the summer weather was not delightful at all, the intended implicature, that is, B's invitation to drop the appropriate topic of conversation, is not rejected. Yeah. So even if you disagree with it, the fact that they're going off topic in some sense is the whole thing. You don't actually have to say anything important. You just, by breaking the maximum of relation, you go off topic. Then you know that whatever they believe, you still understand what they say. And you can still reject that, the implicature, but that's a separate thing to reject. Okay. A similar result holds in situations where the hearer believes that the speaker is lying, saying what she believes to be false, regardless of whether the hearer himself believes P to be false or not. Again, in this case, the implicature is affected differently depending on whether it arises in a violative or non-violative contexts. In both cases, the implicature is successfully conveyed by the speaker and grasped by the hearer. However, only in the former case, the violative context, the hearer will consider the implicature as conveying useful information, and he will be willing to accept it in the common ground. Interesting, in the non-violative context, the hearer, believing that the speaker is lying, asserting what she believes to be false, will assume that the implicature also expresses information that the speaker takes to be false, and obviously he will refrain from accepting it in the common ground. In other words, in non-violative context, the speaker's believing that P is false entails her believing that Q is false, while in violative context, the speaker's believing that P is false does not entail her believing that Q is false. Therefore, in the garage scenario, if A believes that B is lying, according to A, B does not believe that the garage is around the corner. B's intended implicature, that is, the assertion that she believes the garage is around the corner and is open and has petrol to sell, is rejected. Likewise, in the cookie scenario, if A believes that B is lying, according to A, B does not believe that John ate any cookies. The implicature, that is, the assertion that John ate some but not all of the cookies, is rejected. Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing. If you think people are just telling you the truth and everything that you can derive from them should be the truth, but you also think that they're terrible liars, then basically everything that they're giving you is tainted from the get-go. So everything that you think that they should be saying and that they think you should be taking from it, it all goes wrong if you think they are trying to act truthfully. But if you think they're trying to act in like some sort of more sophisticated way, that's different. Now, this is a good point here, actually. If you want to be able to lie well, you don't just do the flat-footed things that you're supposed to say. You make a joke, you make a half-truth, and then you let people imply stuff from his handwriting's good when you're talking about the quality of his philosophy. You let them understand stuff. This is how to lie. Because if you just say, oh, he's bad at philosophy, then, well, either they believe you or they don't, but there's going to be a chance that they think, well, maybe you're just an asshole and you don't like him. So then they can outright reject everything you say. But if you're being like clever about it, then they're like, oh, he's trying to, be clever about it for some reason. And that's a different thing, but they still get the flavor of, the other dude's not good at philosophy. Okay, so this is what the author is going to say here. Contrastingly, in the reference letter scenario, if the addressee believes that A is lying, he has reason to believe that A thinks that Mr. X's command of English is poor. The implicature, that is, the assertion that Mr. X is not good at philosophy for the philosophy job, is not rejected. Similarly, in the reception scenario, if A believes that B is lying, according to him, B does not think the summer weather was delightful. The intended implicature, that is, B's invitation to drop the inappropriate topic of conversation, is not rejected. Yeah, it has nothing. Again, if you're like shifting the topic of conversation, then it doesn't really matter how you're doing it. The more important thing is that you are shifting a topic of conversation. Okay, the following table summarizes my argument. This is the table. If you really want to read it, you can go ahead and download the paper. The presumed falsity of the generating assertion, or the presumption that the speaker is lying, leads to the rejection by the hearer of the speaker's communicative implicature only if the implicature does not involve maximum violation, while an implicature that involves violation is not rejected even though the hearer believes that the generating assertion is false, or even though the hearer believes that the speaker is lying. I argue that this is because the latter kind, differently from the former, does not only relate to the saying of what is said, but relates to the saying of what is said in combination with the non-saying of what should have been said. And see, this is the interesting thing. It assumes that the person who is making an offhanded, like a clever remark, is, saying is not saying what should have been said. But this allows people to, project that you agree with them or something like that. There's some sort of like camaraderie there, and so this is what happens with the politicians nowadays. The politicians nowadays with the dog whistles. When you don't say what you should have said, which is, screw like this minority group, which is what people don't want to say anymore, but they still think it, and then you say something else, it allows them to say, well, I understood what he really meant, but again, maybe they mean it, maybe they don't, but like that, this creates a sense that we understand what's going on here, and this is like an interesting phenomenon that basically is getting used a lot, and explaining this. And this is a good point that the author makes, that this is how the dog, in this case, this is how the dog whistling kind of works. This is part of the background of dog whistling. Okay. Conclusion. The aim of this paper was to point out a new distinction in Grice's analysis of conversational implicatures. The claim is that some conversational implicatures are not only built on the saying of what is said, but rather on the saying of what is said in combination with the non-saying of what should have been said. The distinction between implicatures that only relate to the saying of what is said and those built on the saying of what is said in combination with the non-saying of what should have been said corresponds to the Gricean distinction between conversational implicatures that arise without exploiting any maxim, and those that by contrast arise by means of an exploitation. Conversational implicatures that arise without maxim exploitation are only carried by the saying of what is said, while implicatures that arise in violative context are carried by the saying of what is said in combination with the non-saying of what should have been said. This distinction seems to justify two claims, and this person needs more fucking paragraphs. Oh my god. First, it has been argued that the conversational implicatures have different epistemic requirements depending on whether they arise in violative or non-violative contexts. Implicatures that arise in violative contexts require a larger portion of knowledge than necessitated by implicatures that do not involve any violation. Apart from requiring a general knowledge of the conversational context and its background, a more specific knowledge of the conversational meaning of the words used, implicatures arising in violative context require knowledge of the normative systems that is relevant in the conversational context at hand, and the awareness that the relevant normative system has been flouted. Okay. I have some things to say about this in a moment, but let's get done with it. Secondly, it has been argued that implicatures arising in non-violative context, being built only on the saying of what is said, are more strongly tied to the assertion expressed by the utterance than used in implicatures arising in violative contexts. In fact, assuming that the hearer believes the assertion generating the implicature to be false, or assuming that the hearer believes the speaker is lying, saying what she believes to be false, it has been shown that only implicatures arising in violative contexts have the potential to survive. This result has an interesting implication in situations where the speaker actually lies in uttering P. Let us assume the following situation. The speaker intends to convey Q in order to achieve some goal, and she knows that by saying P, she may succeed in conveying Q, counting on the fact that her hearer believes that she is conforming to the cooperative principle. The speaker believes that P is false, however, she believes that uttering P is the most effective way in communicating Q, so she utters P. In this situation, the speaker's conversational behavior leads to different outputs depending on whether the speaker's implicature involves maximum exploitation or not. In both cases, the speaker successfully conveys the implicature she intends to communicate. However, assuming that the hearer realizes that the speaker is lying, the false assertion test has shown that the speaker can still make use of her intended implicature in the former case, but not in the latter. In both cases, the speaker is lying. She is uttering what she believes to be false. However, in the violative context, she will succeed in adding her intended implicature to the common ground, even though the hearer knows that she is lying. Hence, her insincere behavior does not lead to communicative failure, and it is plausible to expect that she will not be held liable to act in a misleading way. Okay. So, what do we say about this? I mean, I think what the author has said here is correct. Like, they're right. This is a fine paper. I mean, this is one of those, I'm wondering if this is a grad student, perhaps, because they kept repeating themselves at the end. It's like, why are you repeating yourself again? And secondly, this could have, the examples I was giving, I felt, were better than the examples. Yeah, oh, good. I'm happy you enjoyed it. But, I'm going to criticize it a little bit here. I felt like the examples I was giving were better than the examples given. The author really, I don't mind philosophy language. I don't love it anymore. I used to like it a lot better. But, the examples the author was giving was sticking directly with the history here. They could have given some really more fun examples from contemporary life that would have actually expanded upon the sort of that would have given this more philosophical gravitas in the current situation nowadays. They could have basically, talked, as I was saying, about how this is getting used in political speech to, convey more than what is said, like the dog whistle. It's this could have been developed to be a better paper. It's not a bad paper. I'm just saying this could have been developed in an interesting way to make a larger point, and it just seems like they stuck really close to the history here. As I was saying, there's let's go look at the reference list here. Okay, so these are historical papers. This one, these are all historical here. These are all all this stuff, all these stall knockers. These are classic papers. This one here, this is yeah, I don't know, but it's not a lot of stuff. A lot of history. This is all really just the Grice. All this stuff in here, and all this other stuff. It's not I mean, none of it was really used. It was just, I mean, that's what I'm guessing, early career. Because if it's a person like that, that's fine. I have no problem with early career people, of course. But the issue is, yeah, that's the Grice. Yeah, and Stallnacher is cool. But the issue is that it just seems like there's a lot more hay that could have been made here. And they spent all this time in this paragraph here, in this conclusion paragraph. This was completely unnecessary. They were just rehashing stuff that they said above. I mean, they did a little bit of rehashing above too, but they didn't need to do that. They already got this nice little chart here. If you're going to put a chart in, do you need to really rehash it a third time down here? I don't think so. But they could have given some fun examples. And that's part of the problem here, is that it feels like it's a missed opportunity. Good paper missed some, what I feel is some really good low-hanging fruit, especially in this area, because insults are people have been writing about insults and, racism lately in philosophy of language, and I feel like this person missed the easy targets, some low-hanging fruit that they could have applied here and, made a wider, stronger thesis out of this. So, good paper. Just I just felt like it missed opportunities, which is fine. It's fine. If I had a guess, I'm thinking Christian Dahlman is this person's advisor. That's because I don't know, or yeah. Oh no, Roberta Colonna Dahlman, so Christian Dahlman's probably partner at that point. Yeah, so I don't know. But let's see. One of these things. It doesn't matter. Okay, so that was fun first paper. Not a big deal. I agree with, like, it's just like some straight up good philosophy of language. So yeah. So let's go grab another paper then, you know? Let's see if I'm right. I usually don't do this, but screw it. Let's go find out. No. This person's got... Oh, no, no. This person's not new. 2013. So, this person's, interesting. So, I'm wrong. This person's been around a bit. It just seems like a lot of, yeah, it seems like missed opportunity on this paper. It was very strange. You'd think someone like maybe they just threw it together and like it was like all done. So, but also one of the interesting things is, you know, if someone's been around, also a lot of times they have a people profile and this person doesn't. So I'm kind of wondering if they're a linguist, not a philosopher. And so sometimes they publish in philosophy journals, but like it's not like this is not their focus. So they're more concerned with the linguistics than the philosophy. So all right, that would be another option here, that this person's actually more of a linguist than a philosopher. So they're not thinking about the social theory. They're thinking about more of the technical science. But okay, that's fine too.